Hello, everyone. I am your host, Ahad Hussain, and welcome to Season 4 of Titan Alumni Talks, a weekly podcast where we talk to alumni about their experiences at Cal State Fullerton. For this week's episode, we have Yvonne Cuaresma, who is the founder of the Climate Journal Project. She graduated in 2016 with a bachelor's in business admin with an emphasis in finance. Listen as we talk about what sustainability means for us and the planet, along with her goals to combat climate anxiety and environmental grief. You can catch these episodes live at 11 a.m. on Tuesdays at titanradio.org, or you can watch all past episodes on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/CSUF alumni. Thank you, Yvonne, for joining us today on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Ahad. It's really great to be here, even though it's virtual.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't do it in person. I really miss that we did it for like 2 semesters in person, but now we are doing 2 virtually. But hopefully in the fall, we'll get back on and be able to do them in person again.
Yeah. And yeah, we can have a sequel to this episode if you want to do it in person. So
Would love that. That'd be fantastic. All right, so let's get started with what you did at Cal State Fullerton, since that's kind of where your journey began. So you got your bachelor's in business admin, particularly like in finance, and you graduated in 2016, so just a couple of years ago. And so let's just start off. Why did you pick business admin?
yeah, I have always kind of had a passion for entrepreneurship, business. I didn't necessarily think that that's exactly what I was going to do my freshman year. I kind of played around with communication, PR, business, and then I don't know, it was kind of one of those things where I took an accounting class and it didn't bother me, believe it or not. I just loved all the numbers and I loved all of it. I took a finance course and I was hooked. I took an econ course and really I chose business administration because it challenged me and it just resonated with a lot of the impact that I wanted to make in the world. And another piece of that was I could use that degree and apply it to anywhere. And one of my favorite things I did at Cal State Fullerton was the Entrepreneurship Society, if it's still around. And so that was kind of one of the reasons why I just picked it and decided to stay. And now I'm running my own startup, so it kind of has paid off, and it makes sense why I chose that route.
I see. So you didn't directly just go into Cal State Fullerton thinking that you would be a business admin major, but you kind of just played around with your classes until you found something that stuck.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's also kind of like the beauty of Cal State Fullerton. You have a lot of different options to kind of dabble into different areas, and yeah, business has stuck.
And then, like you mentioned, you were doing a couple of programs on campus, and one of them that like stood out to me was the Student Alumni Ambassadors that I'm currently part of. So tell me why you decided to do like all of these different programs, and how did you manage to do them in your 4 years? Because 4 years is not a lot of time.
It's not, but I sure stretched it. My freshman year, I was the president of freshman programs and I was living on campus. So I was also working for the housing office and I was a part of a few other groups on campus. I was also part of a sorority. At some point in my time at Cal State Fullerton, I was a alumni ambassador and I loved that program because I knew that, at some point, my time at Cal State Fullerton was going to end. And even though I didn't want it to, I knew that it was going to end. And I knew that why reinvent the wheel if there are other people that have gone through not the same exact path as me, but a similar path as me. So I really joined not only to support our alumni, but also to continue to learn from them and kind of, ask them questions that I'm not entirely sure of. And I think I was just always a curious student. And so the Alumni Ambassador program really helped me. And from there too, I worked for University Outreach. That was one of my jobs when I was in college. And I fell in love with representing Cal State Fullerton in the Cal State system and helping high school students apply for college. that's what university outreach does. We actually go out into different high schools and talk about the different career paths and different college paths that you could take so that you're successful when you apply for college. And so because I saw how curious like high schoolers were to ask me of what my experience was at Cal State Fullerton, I decided that, taking the chance before I became an alumni to ask those alumni what their experience is and maybe taking advantage of those opportunities that they wish they had taken advantage of would really help me kind of continue to just take advantage of my time at Cal State Fullerton. Because as you said, 4 years is a short amount of time, but if I kind of get the inside scoop from alumni, then it would be easier for me to navigate, a lot of career choices and academic choices.
And then any current students, if you are listening to this podcast, we do still have the Student Alumni Ambassador Network. You can go ahead and join the club so you can get connected with alumni. Plus, this is kind of what the podcast was intended to do, is to get that inside information from alumni. So like you mentioned before, you don't have to reinvent the wheel and try and do something that has already been done before. You could kind of just get the answers from them and just do it with their assistance.
And I guess I'll add to that too. I think being part of a few different groups, I mentioned I was part of Greek Life on Campus, and then I was also part of ASI, Associated Student Incorporated. And through that network, I was able to meet alumni casually. I just met people, here and there that continued to work for the Cal State system. And I just found so much value in leaning on them for guidance that I wanted to continue that involvement and continue that kind of network effect through being engaged with the alumni department. So it's been really great.
You dormed on campus, right? Is that correct? And then how many years was that?
I lived in Pine. I lived in Pine, the freshman dorms, and then I lived in Birch, which is in my second year. So I absolutely loved it. I actually still live with one of my friends at the moment. I actually was in New York City for about 3 years, and I moved back to California after grad school. And when I moved back, I actually ended up moving in with a friend of mine that lived on the same floor as me my freshman year. So it has instituted a lot of long life relationships and friendships. So it's been great.
So you did mention that you were in New York and you actually got your master's from NYU. So that was in food studies. So tell me a little bit about that. And that just seems like an odd 180. You're going from business admin to food studies. So tell me what kind of sparked that and what was the reasoning behind it?
Absolutely. So it definitely is a shock to most people. I think that after I finish, I'm business minded and I love entrepreneurship, but there's also been a side of me that has always been really heavily passionate about environmental and social impact. And while I was on campus at Cal State Fullerton, I was also the chief administrative officer through ASI. I helped start one of the first farmers market on campus. I started a club. It was called the Herbivore Club. It was a vegan, vegetarian, plant-based club. I was really involved in a lot of social and environmental work. And I wanted to apply. I already knew and kind of had the basics of a business knowledge, and I wanted to dive even deeper into the social impact space. And the best thing about, I think, the NYU program was that they started the food studies program in 1994. So the food studies program is basically an intersection between food insecurity, food waste, food entrepreneurship, food tech. And so I took that master's program and was on the food entrepreneurship pathway. And with that program, my thesis and my research was revolved around how to reduce food waste in restaurants and businesses. So as you can see, there's still kind of my involvement in the business aspect of things, and tying it with kind of the food and social environmental impact space. And while I was there, I was I became a semifinalist for one of their entrepreneurship challenges, which is basically kind of like a university startup incubator program. and we were semi-finalists, and I was building an app that helped people find local environmentally friendly restaurants. And when the pandemic happened, all of the restaurants closed. And so unfortunately, we never were able to launch the app. And so we have pivoted since from the app to the Climate Journal project, which I now run. And hopefully post COVID-19, we can pick up where we left off with the app again. But yeah, again, I think that although it seemed, business and food studies seems like two very far off topics, there was a reason why I went after the food studies program in New York City. And it's because I was still able to apply what I've learned and my skills in the business administration side and apply it in the food entrepreneurship space, and also insert a lot of my passion for environmental sustainability.
So before we get into the Climate Journal project, you did found Prep Party. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Prep Party was my first project at NYU, and it came to be when, again, I was trying to bridge kind of a lot of the different things that I wanted to do in my life. So I started a company that helped underprivileged students around New York City. It helped teach them how to meal prep for the work week or the school week. One of the biggest problems in nutrition education is access, not only to food, but also to nutrition education. And so one of the first things that I did in New York when I moved there was I applied to jobs so that I could pay for grad school. And one of my part-time jobs was actually at Crunch Fitness, their headquarters. And I was surrounded by so many people that were so passionate about their health and wellness. And I wanted to bring that, that luxury of health and wellness to underprivileged kids around New York City. So I started teaching classes, and it was a hit. We did a few classes in the NYU dorms, actually. So it was back in kind of like the higher ed space. Unfortunately, I got in a car accident in 2019 of April, and I wasn't able to carry. In New York City, you don't really have a car. So you have to carry everything up and downstairs, and you have to kind of stand a lot. And when I was involved in the car accident, I couldn't continue Prep Party anymore. And so we had to end some of our contracts there.
I see. And then soon after that, that's when you founded the Climate Journal project. So I don't really have much experience with startup, and I'm sure most people don't. So the first thing is give us like a background of what started it, or what kind of gave you the motivation to do that. And then I want you to walk us through like a day of the life of what it is to work at a startup.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give you the background on Climate Journal, and then day in the life will be really interesting because I love to talk about it. So Climate Journal project, I did not know that I was going to be working on this. I didn't know I was going to be back in California. Nobody knew what was going to happen pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, I thought I was going to be staying in New York City for at least a few more years. And I was getting ready to launch the app that I had talked about. And then when all of our restaurants closed and a lot of funding was removed from a lot of environmental initiatives, and I also didn't really feel, in my heart, I didn't really feel like I wanted to quarantine in my small apartment in New York City. I wanted to come back to my family and be as close to them as possible, just in case they got COVID or anything were to happen. And I feel like that was kind of a huge transitional point for a lot of us. While I was living back at my parents' for a few weeks, which turned into months, which had turned into, a year or so.
Now.
Yeah, almost a year now. I was surrounded by my old childhood stuff. And because I was dealing with so many transitions, I was really becoming, to be honest, quite depressed, kind of grieving the life that I had in New York and the momentum that I had in the environmental impact space. And I looked through my childhood bedroom and I found these old diaries that I used to write in. And I kind of just rolled my eyes and I told myself, wow, I thought it was the end of the world when I was dealing with that problem. And so I was like, wait, I should journal about what I'm currently going through, because what if in 5 years from now, maybe it's not that much of a big deal. But, the climate crisis is something that has a lot of urgency. And so there's a lot of weight there. And this felt a little, as an adult, I felt like this was something more serious. So I started to dedicate my journal and my yoga practice to environmental impact. And what I found was, for a long time, even starting at Cal State Fullerton, I've always thought that climate action needed to be something drastic and something so elaborate. It needed to be something, announced. But there are Greta Thunbergs out there. There are climate leaders out there that are making a difference. But for me, I think the center and the compass of anything in the climate and social movement should center around gratitude. And if we don't have an appreciation for each other as humans, and we don't have an appreciation for the planet and the one earth that we know of, then that's what causes a lot of anxiety, and that's what causes, if that core value, if we don't stick by that and if we don't strengthen that, then it becomes really difficult to move forward in solutions and be productive. And so I wanted to kind of spread this realization that I had. And so I started sharing my journal prompts. So every day I had a new journal prompt, and I shared it with my friends. And then within 2 weeks, we went from 14 people to 200 people. And it was just a journal prompt that was being sent to you in your inbox. And then from 200 people, we had people journaling with us from Malawi, Africa, Brazil, parts of Asia, parts of the UK. And that was when I was like, okay, this is actually something. People actually resonate with climate anxiety and environmental grief. People are actually sad about the climate crisis, but don't know what to do about it. And anywho, I did that. And now we're running a Kickstarter campaign for our very first journal book, because the biggest thing about what has changed in our world is that we're always plugged in. We're always receiving notifications. We are always online. Even if you're offline, you're kind of online. And so to tend to the importance of mental health and how that is important in your climate advocacy and social justice advocacy, unplugging is actually more productive sometimes than being online for a consecutive amount of hours. So my hope is that these journal books and the community that we've built represent that gratitude that I was talking about. It's often overlooked, and the simplicity of climate action is not always talked about. And again, it's really just going outside and thinking to yourself, wow, I am so lucky that I get to be able to experience this mountain or this hike or this beach, because it might not be there in 50 to 100 years. But at least what we can do now is show some gratitude and appreciation for it.
So the thing that you built is a very simple thing that anyone can do from home and join along with people all over the world. It doesn't have to be like one huge step. Like maybe you don't have to like donate hundreds of dollars or spend hours out of your day to try and work on something, but instead it's something extremely simple that you can participate in with so many other people. So kind of like the step that you are taking for this as it might not be super impactful if only one person does it, but like you said, it just like compounds. And then you mentioned that after like a couple of weeks, you got 100 or a few hundred. And then after a couple more weeks, you reach international people internationally joining in on the movement. So it seems like the way that like it adds up, it just adds up so quickly.
Yeah. I think, thank you so much for highlighting that. I think that it's one of those things where investing in recharging and investing in yourself would actually allow you to move forward, move the needle a little bit further. And I know you asked what a day in the life of a startup is like. You want me to go into that?
Yeah, I don't believe that it would be easy. It seems like it's a lot of work, especially now, like during a pandemic. with a lot of places closed and like hours all being shifted and working from home even, it just doesn't seem like, well, go on. Like you tell me how it is.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I've never published a book before. I don't really necessarily have a background in psychology, even though I understand it and I follow it and all of that. So I think when you run a startup, you really have to understand the problem. It has to either be so close to you every single day. For me, it was a personal thing that um, my network of people, not only at New York, NYU, but also here in California, really was it was all of us shared a similar sentiment for the environment, and it's been yeah, I was able to really hear a lot of people and really understand like why they're dealing with what they're dealing with. And so as the founder of a startup, you do have to wear many different hats. Within the team and outside the team. So I am my own secretary. I am the director of director of marketing, director of product design, director of like logistics, operations. It's really a lot to learn, and it's really all exciting stuff. I would say that most of the things that I hop into, or a new project or campaign that I hop into, is all pretty foreign to me. But there are a lot of things that I've done in my life and have learned actually through Cal State Fullerton or through my time at NYU, that I'm like, oh, this is just like running a digital campaign is just like running an event in real life. I have to make sure that our invitations are out. I have to make sure that we have RSVPs. I have to make sure that our messaging is for the event is clearly communicated. And so while you're dealing with kind of all of the moving parts to your startup, I think the other piece that is not always talked about is I'm also always looking for someone to learn from. So I'm always looking for, oh, like another journal book that was also started in someone's home or something. And I'm like, hey, like I'm sending a lot of cold emails because I'm like, hey, I've never done this before and you seem to be really successful. I would love your help. A lot of my time, anytime I'm going grocery shopping, if I'm driving over to my sister's apartment, I'm listening to podcasts that are helping me as not only not only a founder to be able to run the operations of the company, but also to be the best manager and to be the best leader that I can be. Because I can't do this alone. So I've hired interns, and I've had folks that have worked on this with me. So in order to work on the startup, you actually also have to be really flexible. You're a people person, and with running the Kickstarter, something changes every day. People find out about you in many different ways. You try to have people, understand your message, and then you're also you're fundraising. So you're also making sure that you're raising enough funds so that you can meet your goal, and then also making sure in the back end that you're producing the product accordingly so that you can fulfill all of the rewards that you have promised people. And along that, you're also making sure that people in your field know exactly what you're doing, and so that you're supporting other environmental orgs. So that was quite a handful, I know, but yeah, there are lots of moving parts. But I would say the biggest chunk of my time is spent on learning how to be better at XYZ. Whether that's an operational piece of my role as a founder or the leadership piece of my role as a founder. I'm always trying to better myself, how do I better communicate to someone that they did something wrong? Or how do I better applaud them for when they did something amazing? Is it just a simple thank you email, or do I need to do something bigger? So it's always I'm learning as I go, but I would say a big chunk of my time is learning.
So I like how it kind of touched back to when you mentioned at Cal State Fullerton, you learned a lot from alumni, so you didn't have to reinvent the wheel. And that seems like what you're kind of doing right now as well, where you do listen to these podcasts, you do send out those cold emails, just so you don't have to start from scratch. And if there's a better way to do it, you can find out quickly rather than the hard way by just like testing it and going on to it, because you're not alone in this. You have people who are dependent on you. And if you take too long, or if you're not doing it as optimally as you can, it could hurt those people who you have hired or you have reached out or who are backing your Kickstarter, because they expect some results, they expect some progress. So I kind of like how what you were doing at Cal State Fullerton still applies to what you are doing now.
Yeah, 100%.
And then I had a question about burnout. You're doing quite a bit like at one time, and did quite a bit at Cal State Fullerton as well. So this is like a two-part question. Do you experience burnout? And if so, how do you like come back from it? How do you bounce back? And if you don't, how do you prevent burnout?
I almost wonder if that is why I started the journal practice, or that's why this is so important to me, because I have experienced burnout. I mean, I had been experiencing burnout since I was like in high school, where I was, if anybody's ever been in a sport before, you know that practice during competition season starts before class and also occurs during lunchtime sometimes, and it also occurs after classes. And when I was in dance, I used to have to show up to practice at 6 a.m. in the morning, show up for lunch, and then be in the dance room until 8, 9, 10 p.m. and then go home and do some homework, and then have competition over the weekend. So I've experienced burnout at a very young age, but it's very different when you're an adult, because as you know, as someone in high school, you don't necessarily have as much responsibility. And when you're an adult, the stakes are much higher. So when you're at grad school, you're paying to be there. To be quite frank, you're paying to be there. And so you don't want to waste your time and your energy on things that aren't going to serve you. And so one of the ways, actually, I experienced my very first panic attack right before I was hopping into a subway in New York City. I was working full time. I was an event coordinator for a while, Cornell Medicine, so Cornell University's medical school. And I needed a job in order to pay for grad school. So was working full time, then going to grad school in the evening. And I remember, I think I had too much on my plate, and I missed an assignment that I had to present on that evening. And I had just a crazy panic attack. And I made it to class, but couldn't breathe. I didn't even know where I was going. And it was from that moment that I was like, okay, things need to change. And I don't know exactly what it is, but I need to observe my patterns so that this doesn't continue to happen again. And, I think burnout is different at every stage in your life, because how many things you're carrying will change, and the weight of those things that you're carrying will change. So anyways, long story short, I think slowing down has really helped me. Slowing down meaning actually, going to a yoga class, journaling, doing something that isn't about your work, and just taking time for yourself, going on a walk, even if you're not into meditation or anything like that, allows me to just be present in the moment. Because anxiety and burnout comes from when you are way too worried about the past and you are looking way too forward in the future. And anxiety doesn't allow you to live in the present, because you are stuck way back there or way up there. And so going back to kind of, why the journal practice has helped me, my brain runs on like 100 miles per hour. And when I have to write it, I'm actually not as fast. I think faster than I can write. So when I'm actually writing things down about how I feel or what I'm doing, it actually allows me to be like, oh, okay, like this is exactly like, these are the things that have been distractions, or these are the things that I'm using as distractions. And these are actually the top 3 important things that I need to finish today. The other distractions can come and go, but it allows me to basically organize my thoughts. And then the second part to burnout is, which is really hard, is asking people for help. It is not natural for a lot of us because we are so independent and we just have an independent culture. It's hard for us to ask for help, and it's hard to even know what type of help you need. So I think that, again, I don't mean to just like drive everything back to journaling, but for me, it really does help to like write things down. And so I've kind of, every day I journal before I answer the phone or before I hop into a meeting, and it's just a release. And then sometimes I'll relook at what I've released and I kind of circle the things that are really affecting me. And then I'm like, oh, these are the things that I love about my day. And these are the things I don't love about my day, or that I don't feel I'm really good at. So those things that I'm kind of insecure about or whatever, I will be like, okay, Monday morning, I journaled about being afraid of my blog and not knowing if it's good enough, blah, blah, blah. So then my action item becomes reach out to a blogger, reach out to someone and ask them about their blog posts or their operations. And so having a system that works for you, I guess, to create that space so that you are vulnerable, and you don't have to be vulnerable with someone else. If you just need kind of like a dumping place, pen and paper is a great way to start, and it's also free. So yeah, having a place for that, and then just being realistic with yourself, just be like, okay, like I'm not going to be good at the 10 things that I want to do. These are the 5 things that I actually need to seek help.
You brought up quite a lot of good points, talking about how to prevent burnout. It puts it like really into perspective how it is a lot easier to like plan out your day once you get your mind focused on just one thing. Because I know, especially now that we are in quarantine, everything's happening over the phone or during meetings. So you're bombarded with like notifications and emails and messages. So putting all of that aside in the first thing in the morning and then focusing your mind on only one thing allows you to be more focused and more productive. And then it seems like you also have like to-do lists that you do check out like maybe daily or weekly or monthly. And I've recently started doing that, and it does help quite a bit. I just have like a notes widget on like the front screen of my phone. So if I see that there's something there that isn't checked off, then I should be working on something, or at least it like just comes up in my mind and I won't forget about it. So it seems like a lot of little things that we can be doing like day to day in order to become like more productive and prevent that burnout. And like you mentioned, sometimes you can just miss an assignment, but by doing something like this, you're less likely to.
Yeah. And then thanks for bringing that point, because also being really mindful of not filling up your to-do list with too many things, right? Because eventually when you fill it up with too many things, it becomes overwhelming. And maybe that's an area where you're like, oh, like I have 7 things to do, I'm not going to get this done. Maybe it's time to delegate it to your business partner or whoever you're working with. So I think it's also, yes, creating those to-do lists, but also taking the time to check in and and say like, is this something that's realistic for me to handle? And that's not to say it's not good to be an overachiever. It's great to be an overachiever, but I also think when we're talking about burnout, you can only be so productive if you are healthy physically and mentally. So yeah, sometimes our biggest enemy is ourselves.
So I have a question about this project that you are doing. So your Kickstarter campaign is like coming to an end in the next couple of days. So what are like your next goals? Because it's only been a little over a year, almost 2 years since you started this. So where do you see this going in the future?
That's a really good question. Actually, we started May of 2020, so it's almost going to be a year. Yeah, we haven't hit our 1 year mark yet, but I guess from last year, we moved from a digital journal into a physical journal. My hope is for the next year or so, we actually have a blog and also a podcast that talks about climate anxiety, and that we don't want people to just sit in the grief and the anxiety that they experience or they come to us for. We also want them to see and understand solutions. So the podcast brings people from all over the world that are working on solutions for environmental sustainability. And moving forward, if we are able to kind of have in-person events again, but I mean, we can do virtual events, but we're hoping to do climate wellness events through workshops and through retreats almost. So what that looks like and what that means is that we're helping people cope with their anxieties through these workshops. And we're basically, it's kind of a guided journal practice that is dedicated to the environment. And we do that all together in the workshop. And the retreat brings in a lot of different elements. The retreat is meant to continue to marry the idea of mental health and wellness to environmentalism and why that's important to becoming an advocate in the space.
All right, we're going to ask her the quickfire questions and get her opinions on some of these are controversial topics. So I hope you're ready for them.
Oh, I hope so.
All right, so for the first one, do you prefer coffee or tea?
Tea.
So which was better, undergrad or graduate school?
I would say undergrad.
Okay, so are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
So the city or the woods?
I would say the woods.
So do you prefer in-person or virtual?
In person, 100%.
So do you prefer phone calls or text messages?
Phone calls.
So waffles or pancakes?
I eat pancakes more often. I don't make any of those for breakfast. I usually eat like oatmeal in the morning, but I've had, if you guys ever visit New York City, there's a place called Veselka and they sell buckwheat pancakes. And ever since I had those pancakes, I think my life has changed and I always crave pancakes for breakfast.
So yeah. iOS or Android?
iOS.
Okay. So do you prefer online shopping or shopping in a store?
Shopping in a store.
Do you journal with a pen or a pencil?
Pen.
Okay. Do you prefer like a thriller movie or a comedy movie?
Oh, I like both. Gosh. But if I had to choose, I would say comedy.
And then the last question, winter or summer?
I love summer because I don't have to carry that many things.
All right, so that wraps it up for the quickfire questions. So let's get back to some of the things that you currently do. And one of the questions I wanted to ask was, what does success mean to you? Because I know a lot of people, maybe their end goal of success is starting their own business or a startup and like having their own times or their own hours to work. So how does that like apply to you?
Oh, that gave me chills when you asked me that because I don't think I've thought about this in a while. I think when you think of success and goals and stuff as a founder, you're always looking at, if we reach X amount of, followers or engagement on social media, that will be successful or whatever. But when you take a step back and as a founder, what the success means to you, it's a lot deeper than that. And I think for me, it goes beyond the journal books. I think that if I am able to help somebody, if I'm able to motivate someone to take action, even if it's to join an event, or if it's to volunteer for an organization, or to watch a movie on environmentalism, plastic pollution, I would count that as a success, because I think that what is lacking in the environmental movement is an open door, welcoming anyone. So I'll tell this story. When I was really young, I went to Glen Oaks Elementary in Glendale, California, and my teacher asked the class, and she said, "Who here is a feminist?" And this was in 2003 or 4, and nobody really raised their hand because nobody really understood what a feminist meant. And so she was like, "Okay, well, how many of you," she's like, no one raises their hand. We're like, "I don't know," like, blah, blah, blah. We were really hesitant. When she asked the second question, she says, "So who here thinks that the girls in this classroom and your mothers, or any woman in your life should have the right to vote. And everybody's hand shot up. And she looks at the class and she goes, well, that means that everybody here is a feminist. And so I think that transition needs to happen with environmentalism. I think that my question to everybody watching this is, who cares about clean water, clean air, plastic-free ocean, so that one day when you're surfing out there, you don't necessarily see plastic bags floating. If you care about those things, if you care about mountaintops and stuff, sure, there's a lot of different sciences and a lot of different, debates around climate change and yada yada. But at the end of the day, if you care about what we have and how beautiful the sky is, then I would also call you an environmentalist. And I think that I would call the Climate Journal Project as a success is if we continue to invite more people towards this. And a friend of mine and I talk about this a lot, climate optimism. If people feel more connected and people are encouraged to have a relationship with the planet in their own way. You might be passionate about renewable energy where I am passionate about water, but at least you and I are walking towards the same goal, which is conservation and preserving our planet. Then we're both, it's fine. Like, we're both kind of like in the club or in this like space of trying to leave this world a better place than the way we found it. So long story short, my vision and my definition of success is if I'm having a climate journal event one day or whatever, and I look around the room and I'm like, wow, like all of these people are here by choice. It's not because I forced them to care about the environment. It's because they all care about the beauty of nature, and they all care about continuing to share that passion and that love for the planet the same way that I've felt. So hopefully that's not too abstract of an answer, but I do think, if we're placing measurements on this, I would say a successful climate journal project will be kind of global. People will understand the power of journaling, and hopefully one day I can walk into a room and people will be like, oh, I understand why, they won't ask me what my experience of journaling is. They will tell me what their experience of journaling has been and how journaling has helped them in terms of becoming closer to the planet.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, that was a good answer. Just talking about how this is like starting up and where its success does lie in the future. And I like the example you gave with targeting people who do not know much about like climate activism, like many people didn't know about feminism many years ago, and talking about just simple things that would make someone a climate activist.
I would say one of my favorite memories is, so the gastronome is the place where people that live on campus, that's kind of like their kitchen, and that's their cafeteria. So one of my favorite memories is just going there and hanging out, even though I wasn't hungry, and just going there because I had like the unlimited 5-day pass or something. And then I remember one day kind of walking out of the gastronome, and the sun was setting because I think I got out of class really late and the sun was setting. And I looked at my calendar and I was like, oh, I have nothing on my calendar. But I looked around the campus and I remember thinking, even though I have no plans, I have an unlimited amount of things that I can do today. And it's all because of the campus. I could go to a housing event. I could go to an ASI event. I could hang out with my friends that I live with, on my floor because I lived on campus. I could hang out with my sorority sisters. But it was such an interesting feeling. I didn't commit to anything. I didn't do anything. I just remember looking at the sunset, walking out of the gastronome, and being so fulfilled with how much Cal State Fullerton had given me. And I took a photo. I think I deleted it off my Instagram, but I remember just being so grateful for for that, because I also remember when my parents left me, when they helped me move in, I remember standing in that same spot because I think we parted ways right in front of the gastronome and looking up at the sky and being like, oh my gosh, this is like my parents have left. Now I have to be on my own. But at this particular day, around dinner time, I felt so happy to be on campus and to be able to sleep, eat, go to class on campus. And I was able to do that for 2 years. So I don't think there's a particular memory, but I just remember that moment where I felt like I had so many choices, and it was because of the community that Cal State Fullerton brought to me.
That is pretty interesting. It's just like having that free time and like choice to do whatever you want. And I feel like you get that a little bit more in undergrad than you would sort of if you're doing your master's, because I just feel like with your master's, everything is just like so booked. You're kind of busy with a lot of things. And then, like you mentioned, most people do have jobs while they're getting their master's as well. So it's kind of just a little bit more difficult in comparison to your undergrad.
And that's one of the things I think I would say, I know that folks are online right now, but Cal State Fullerton still, like there are how many, like 30,000, 40,000 students on campus, and those are just students. There are faculty members, there are a network of alumni, there's the network, even past Cal State Fullerton, there's the CSU community. And I don't think that I wouldn't change a thing. I've always felt supported at Cal State Fullerton, and I still continue to feel that way.
So tell me a little bit about some advice you would give to students who are maybe trying to start a startup or their own business, and what are like some tips that you have gone through that you would wish that like other students or maybe people who already graduated would follow?
I would say that it's never going to feel like the right time to start. So the best time to start is now, because, sometimes the only way out is through. And so if you're always wondering, if you're always waiting for the right time to start a business or a startup, it's most likely not necessarily going to jump out in front of you and be like, okay, February 15 is the perfect day to do this. It's not something that you can schedule. My tip for that too, though, is because things are sometimes uncertain and inevitable in startup culture, just be prepared for anything. Put all of your hard work into whatever you're doing, but then also leave a little bit of room to be flexible, because you never know when a pandemic is around the corner. You never know when, a car accident, like what happened to me, will happen. And those are the things that we can't plan for. We can only plan so much. And for me as a planner, a type A, I'm very type A. I think that's something that I had to loosen my grip on. I had to loosen my grip on set plan. And the more I was able to, plan as much as I can, but then also be like, you know what, if this doesn't work out, then it wasn't meant to be. And also with startup culture, there's always like a new set of problems. Sometimes for me right now, I'm like, okay, when the Kickstarter is over, it will free up X amount of time. Not really, because after the Kickstarter is over, I have to now, my new kind of project is fulfilling all of those orders. And you always are, with the continuous growth of your company, you will also be continuously growing. And so you cannot necessarily expect to grow without some criticism sometimes, without falling on your butt sometimes. And so take those moments as moments to learn, because as I always say, sometimes rock bottom is not really rock bottom. It's actually a springboard for the next best thing. And that's what I would want to leave. That's a tip that I would want to leave some Cal State Fullerton folks that are interested in starting their own thing or starting a startup.
That is awesome advice that people could use when starting a startup. I know a lot of people try and give up early, or it might not even be just doing like a startup, but maybe their own personal goals. Like they might say like, oh, tomorrow I'll start journaling, or tomorrow I'll start reading or working out. But that tomorrow just turns into next year and that never happens. So just like starting right now is like the best thing that you can do. And,
yeah. I always say, if I don't do it now, I won't do it. Like, if I don't do it now, then I'm not going to leave room, to do it later. It's going to fall at the very bottom of my to-do list.
Mm-hmm. And then to end it off, I just had a question. Could you give a pitch for your two areas of studies, so business admin and then food studies? So tell me why someone would want to get into those and what the future holds for them.
Yeah, I would say business administration has taught me so much more than I expected. I think I'm always looking back into what I learned in college, and I'm like, oh, like, yeah, like supply and demand, yada yada. Business allows you to put a certain pair of glasses on into anything. If you're interested in the stock market, if you're interested in startups, if you're interested in tech, if you're interested in food, having a business-based knowledge will always prepare you for what's to come. I don't think that business knowledge will ever be something that becomes useless. And so business finance, on the other hand, has been really interesting it's always interesting to whip out those book of notes anytime I am preparing for a presentation. When I was in the startup incubator, I understood all of the terms. You're not always going to remember every single detail of every single class that you take. I don't remember every investment class that I take or anything like that, but you always have the basics and you can always apply it to anything that you do. Even if you work for a nonprofit, I know it feels counterintuitive, but nonprofits have CFOs and they also deal with cash flow and money and investments and grants and stuff. So business administration gives you so much basic knowledge that you can take anywhere with you, anywhere in the world. It's a pretty common language, I would say. It doesn't really change. In terms of food studies, I would say that food is also a common language. So I think I've been lucky enough to pick two areas of studies where it's pretty commonly known. Business, if I were to move to, a part of Europe one day, I could easily probably find a job that is tailored to my interests and my skills. Food is also a common language. So no matter where you are in the world, there is probably going to be some sort of food insecurity issue. There are groceries in that area. There are probably food tech companies that are trying to improve the longevity of certain foods or improve the organic systems in that country. And so I would say the food studies program, while it was specific to the intersections of food insecurity and food waste, I could really take that knowledge. Even if my knowledge is basically just in the US, I could really take my business and food knowledge and take it anywhere I go in the world. So I didn't want to go into too much specifics of which schools, but I also think that depending on your mentors, depending on the clubs and organizations that you're a part of, then you can tap into different networks. I've met people from the World Resources Institute, the UN, Oceanic Global, different food banks all over the world, and then different investors from all over the world. So it's nice to have an academic background that people resonate with. So people will always resonate with business, or people will always have an experience with food.
Mm-hmm. So those are like good pitches to both of them. So if people are maybe undeclared or they're trying to get into Cal State Fullerton, don't know what they should focus on, those two are some perfect areas of study for people to major in.
Yeah, absolutely. If that's where your heart lies, then I recommend it. And if it's not, then taking one class will lead you to the next class, and somehow, some way, you'll find your way.
Any of you students out there, if you want, you can join the Titan Pro Network. And Yvonne, I'm not sure if you have heard of it or if you are on it.
I don't know. I just came back to California, so hopefully I'm on it. So sign me up if I'm not on it yet.
So basically what our Titan Pro Network is that it's basically like our own LinkedIn site for Cal State Fullerton students, alum, and faculty and staff. So it is very easy to get connected with other people from Cal State Fullerton, regardless of where you are and like what your position is at CSUF. So, and it's a very good way to ask like those questions to alum. If you're not sure, like going back to like the very beginning of this episode where we talked about you not needing to reinvent the wheel, and instead you can just get those tips and advice from those alum who have gone through those experiences. So yeah, once you join it, it's very simple to do. You can just sign up with your LinkedIn if you already have one. And with it, you can just reach out to any alumni on there. And currently we have over 1,000 alumni signed up. So there's going to be someone who can give you advice on whatever you're going through.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait to be part of it.
So thank you so much, Yvonne, for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you. I had such a blast coming back and talking to some Cal State Fullerton students, but also alumni. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.